Hello again, Justice Warriors. How are you this afternoon? Um, I am really excited to talk about this case of Kaylin Schulte and Crystal Turner. At the same time, I'm very leery of it. It's a closed case, and I certainly wouldn't want to offend any of the family members. So it is important to me to discuss it because I don't feel like it was addressed appropriately by law enforcement. Um, so let me start out by saying that everything I say is simply my opinion and it is purely speculation for the sake of opening up a conversation, starting a discussion, hopefully being educational and made specifically for YouTube, which, as we all know, is a entertainment platform. So that said, please hit the thumbs up if you like this video as you watch it. Please consider subscribing and sharing. I don't think a lot of true crime has focused on this couple. Um, Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner, many people will remember from the Moab area. They were murdered a day or two after Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie had a domestic violence call come and interact with them out by the entrance to the Delicate Arches. Hey, allegedly, and Rhonda, thanks so much for being here, you guys. I really appreciate it. Um, so this is a really hard case to talk about. So I've got all my favorite people here. Oh, I could just cry. Pixie Knickers. Um, so thank you. Thank you. This is a really emotional case, and I'll tell you why. Kylan and Crystal were lesbians, and their case seemed to kind of just go flat in the water. And Crime and Crochet is here too. Awesome. I have a mod. Um, it got buried by the Gabby coverage. So sad. You know, Gabby Petito was a huge profile case, so there is maybe something to that, but I think it was more so the homophobia about this beautiful lesbian couple. Not only were they a beautiful lesbian couple, they were kind of living off the grid in a very, very responsible way. I mean, they both had full-time jobs. They had a pet bunny and they were doing like the van life kind of thing, living at I think where they were staying when they got murdered was a national park out there on LaSalle Loop Road. So yeah, it definitely got buried. So for to catch you guys up real quick, anybody who isn't familiar or just to refresh your memory, um, Adam Pikowski, I think is how you say his last name, was alleged to have been their killer. And it kind of got wrapped up, I think, around this last May of 2022. Um, Adam was somebody who had worked briefly with Crystal at the McDonald's that she worked at. And he had already left the state after the lovely couple was killed. And by the time they fingered him as the suspect, he had allegedly unalived himself. So it's a pretty heinous miscarriage of justice, in my opinion. However, I did follow the case as that was all happening. And I know that Kylan Schulte's father was okay with it. I mean, he was more than okay with it. He felt like it was justice that this guy was no longer on earth. So, like I said, I'm very trepidatious because I really, really don't want to do anything to upset the family in any way, shape, or form. They've had enough of that, haven't they? Um, so, you know, for those of us that followed Gabby Petito's case, which I would imagine almost all of us did, if not all of us, um, Gabby and Brian Laundrie were having a dispute outside of their white van in front of the Moonflower Co-op, a health food store, where um, apparently Gabby had been either in that co-op or right near it, like a coffee shop. I don't know if the coffee shop was attached to the co-op or next door. But anyway, Gabby had been working on her website for the van life, and Brian had been arguing with her, trying to pull her away from the laptop to go for a hike out at the Delicate Arches. So I think that they'd been there for a long time, like maybe somewhere around 8 hours. It was about 4 in the afternoon, if I'm remembering accurately, when they had their explosive dispute. He locked her out of the van. He hung her backpack on the back door of her van, and he was hitting her on the sidewalk before he got into the van and locked her out. And then somehow she like crawled over him he was in the driver's seat, and she got into the van and she was crying, and people called 911 and said this guy had been hitting this girl. And we all know the rest of the story, right? The police went and pulled them over at the entrance of Delicate Arches, and that's where the body cam starts, with the kind of a routine traffic stop, but it was for the domestic violence. But Brian was driving, and he was going 45 miles an hour in a 15-mile-an-hour zone. And then as he was pulling over, he ran up on the curb, and the police officer whose body cam was on was pretty upset by the huge speeding, triple the speed limit, and this haphazard running up on the curb thing. And then when he got out of the car and spoke with the couple, Brian just kind of had him wrapped around his pinky, right? Um, and what is important to me about Kaylin Schulte and Crystal Turner's case is that Kaylin worked at the Moonflower. Both of these women had full-time jobs where they went in very early. So Kaylin was one of the openers that day, and so she had been there all day. I think she might have gotten off work at 2 o'clock, but I believe she was still there when the domestic violence call was made. So there were a lot of people that speculated that Kaylin might have made that phone call, which is immaterial. I think there were two parties that called 911. She may or may not have been one of the parties, but this is a small town, and Kaylin was 6 feet tall with dreadlocks. She was extremely attractive, 24 years old, did the van life thing. And Gabby, also extremely attractive and 21 years old, was there. They were in each other's company nearby, in a close proximity, in a small town at a small co-op, for a good 6-8 hour time span. So chances of them interacting are about 90%, I would say 99%, somewhere in there. So there was probably conversations. They were probably talking about her website. This is all speculation. Let me remind you. Anyway, when that whole situation happened with Gabby and Brian and the police, we all know that Brian was given a hotel room or motel room, which was just right around the corner from where the Moonflower was. And we don't know if he stayed there that night. We don't know where Gabby stayed that night. That information has never surfaced, which I find extremely suspicious. But what we do know is that Kylan and Crystal were at Woody's Tavern the following night, August 13th. And there's footage of them having a really good time, hanging out with their friends, having a couple beers, playing pool. There were rumors that maybe Gabby and Brian had gone to Woody's Tavern, but I don't think that ever was substantiated. However, the next morning, August 14th, at about 11:35 a.m., there was gunshots. There were probably 10 gunshots altogether, 5 in each of these women. And they were heard, not only heard, but they were recorded, because there was a wedding venue right near there. and they were videotaping the wedding. So there were multiple witnesses to the gunshots, and it was actually recorded on the wedding video. So they were able to piece all that together. But in real time, when it happened on um, the 14th of August in 2021, um, you know, Kylan and Crystal didn't show up for work. It took a couple of days. Kylan's father was very worried. He put on Facebook how worried he was, and he asked anybody who was willing to go look for them. A woman who I will just call Cindy went up to LaSalle Loop. She knew them and she knew LaSalle Loop, and she searched for them for 5 hours and she found them. She found Kylan and was extremely shaken up, and she was on the phone with the dad when she found her, and then they called 911. She didn't find the other one. She waited in her car with the doors locked until the police arrived. So Cindy had gone on the Pascal show. That was where I learned of her and her story. The Pascal show is a wonderful YouTube true crime platform, and Pascal interviewed Cindy, and she told her story, and she was so shaken up. She was so traumatized. Um, so that's just kind of a thumbnail to get you guys caught up. The majority of the world believes he did, Larissa. Just not me. There's a reason I don't believe it. That's strong. Um, Oh, interesting that you don't think that Adam passed away, or Brian Laundrie. You're probably talking about Brian Laundrie. Absolutely. Okay. So yes, and I will get to that. I don't believe that Brian Laundrie passed away either, and I'll explain to you why. But I also am highly suspicious that Brian Laundrie is the one that killed Kylan and Crystal. And there's a real bizarre reason why I think that, other than the fact that he could have been really mad at thinking that Kylan was one of the people that phoned in to authorities about them having a domestic dispute. But one of the things that Cindy said when she was at their campsite looking for them, and she knew it was their campsite, she knew their bunny rabbit, and she found their bunny, and then she saw a stack of Gatorade bottles, unopened Gatorade bottles. And this might sound really weird, but it sounded very peculiar the way she described it. And if you're watching the body cam footage of Gabby and Brian Laundrie, the law enforcement is trying to offer the two of them beverages many times because it was like 100 degrees that day. It was one of the hottest days of the summer, and they're out there in the desert. So I'm sure that's just routine that law enforcement offers everybody water or Gatorade. And Gabby was dying of thirst. That was actually why they were going out to the Delicate Arches, was to fill up their 6-gallon water bottle. Brian had this thing where he didn't like plastic, which I don't like plastic either, but when you're dehydrated and you're in the desert, you just drink water out of whatever kind of vessel you need to, in my opinion. So Gabby was very accepting of the two small water bottles that law enforcement handed her, but Brian absolutely wouldn't take them. He was adamant. He was like all hoity-toity, like he was way too good for their plastic water bottles, and he didn't want to put them out because he didn't want to be high maintenance when he was just like such a drama queen. But the law enforcement also gave Gabby a bottle of Gatorade, and she was adamant that she drank nothing but water. So she actually set that unopened Gatorade bottle down on the dirt, like on the curb right outside of the sheriff's SUV that she'd been sitting in, to chill out, literally, like with the air conditioning while they're interacting with Brian. And that Gatorade bottle was left there, so unopened. So this is just me, and maybe I'm crazy, right? I think that Brian was so pissed off with Gabby and with law enforcement and with their stupid plastic and their Gatorade, and the people that caused all the trouble for him by calling 911, that to me, those Gatorade bottles at the crime scene are very significant. And I know that that can be argued, but that's one of the pieces of evidence that points to Brian to me. What also points to Brian to me is what I've already shared with you about Kylan being at the Moonflower from opening until 2. And then, like I said, she was still there a couple hours later, just hanging out and doing her thing, probably waiting for Crystal to get off of work or something like that, right? Because they would their campsite was pretty far away from town, maybe 45 minutes or more even. So they would come into town together and they would go back out to their campsite together. So anyway, the whole situation was so awful and definitely got overshadowed by the Gabby Petito's tragedy. And I think, like I said, the homophobia. Um, and it's always felt to me like it was a hate crime, that they were murdered because they were lesbians. And, you know, a SA, I don't think was ever completely delineated. And it's a horrible thing to even think about in any situation, but especially with women that choose to be with women. Horrible, horrible, horrible. So I don't really want to get into that. That's just a whole nother level of awful, disgusting bullshit, right? What I wanted to get into is just kind of fleshing out the case. And again, to jog your memory, if you remember, Dog the Bounty Hunter went out there this last May 7th, 2022. He went out to Moab to help figure out who the heck did this. And he was in communication with Kaylin's father. And the minute he got there on May 7th, they suddenly solved the case. Like, I think within 24 hours, they had it all nailed down. Like, oh, it was this guy, Adam, and he's dead now. So, done deal. Really? Really? Let me read a couple. Allegedly, you're so nice. I love your thing. I'm going to just highlight that. You're not crazy at all. Well, thank you. And sometimes I just don't even think it's a problem to be crazy, because I kind of think everybody's crazy. Like, life is crazy. Like, I like to say there's good crazy and there's bad crazy. you know, I certainly hope I'm not the bad crazy. And I definitely sometimes absolutely am hopefully the good crazy. So I feel like it's important to readdress this case because I don't think justice was even close. And like you guys were talking about with Brian Laundrie, I don't think justice was even close with that case either. And I 100% don't believe he's dead. Absolutely. Um, so the parent, Larissa says the parents helped him get away. They set stuff up at the site to make it seem like he was there. And that's why they conveniently found his stuff and not the police. That whole thing was so fucking whack, was it not? It's just mind-boggling. So first of all, Mr. Brian Laundrie had a 30-day lead on the police, as the police said, oh no, we're surveilling the house and we know exactly where he is at all times, right? To me, it's very obvious that his parents had connections. His mother had worked like in the DA's office or something like that in Long Island. And they had that ridiculous Steve Bertolini mafia mobster type attorney from up there from Long Island, who the Petitos are suing now, which is awesome. They're suing the Laundries, and they just named Steve Bertolini into their lawsuit maybe 2 weeks ago. I was so happy to hear that. These people are just disgusting. And, talk about gaslighters. Do you guys remember? I'm sure, like I said, I know that we all followed the case. Remember that crazy idea about Brian Laundrie being like under a little garden box, like a raised flower bed. And there was the drone footage where you could see like a little hand on the framework of the um, raised bed garden. And you could see that little hand on the side. And his mother was handing him something. And yes, I'm going to say it. He was in that freaking, like, whatever you want to call it, like a bomb shelter. And people were saying, oh no, that would never work. You couldn't have a bomb shelter like that in Florida because of all the sand. And guess what? My sister lives in Florida, and a lot of people have those bomb shelters in the sand. A lot of people have swimming pools in the sand. Yes, people, you can have that type of structure in Florida underground. So, yeah, I believe that they were hiding him in there for however many days. I believe that they snuck him out of the country, and I believe that he's living somewhere laughing his ass off. Okay. That's what I believe, and I don't think it's the least bit crazy. What I think is crazy is people who buy that freaking story about the dad walking up with his stuff and then saying, "Oh, look what I just found." And just that whole thing, like the that park had been closed for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I don't even remember. They had been searching that park for weeks. The federal authorities, the FBI, everybody, and they couldn't find nothing. And then they wrapped up the search, opened it to the public, and then within 24 hours, the mom and the dad go out at 7:30 in the morning with the FBI. They called Steve Bertolini the night before to let them know. And then they showed up and said, "Oh, look at the dry bag we just found. And look, there's a half note in it and a journal and pictures and a Moab coffee hat or something." I mean, the whole thing was absurd. And then we come to find out that Brian Laundrie's uncle was a dentist. And I think they just happened to have like his dental record in their back pocket or something. And then they're like, "Oh, look, a tooth, and look, it all matches. Yeah, case solved within half an hour the morning that the parents go out there." It was fucking ridiculous. I'll just say it. Hey, Scottish Emma. He was never there, Larissa says. That's probably the most likely. That sandbox, in that sandbox, it was a glove. The mom was doing gardening. Come on, people. No fool. You know what? You're not supposed to use all caps. I'm going to just delete that because you're not supposed to use all caps. Um, but screw your attitude, okay? I mean, yeah, it is a crazy freaking idea, but we're not the ones who came up with it. It was the Laundries that came up with that. And then they wanted to say, "Oh, look how crazy you people are to think that he could be in a box." If you're watching the drone footage, the mom is not gardening. She has no tools in her hands. She's got no gloves. She hands something to the hand that clearly comes up out of the side of the box. So, yeah, get with the program, man. I mean, sure, you're allowed to have any opinion you want, but you're not allowed to be an asshole in my chat. And if you do it again, you're gone. Grr. I can't stand that stuff. People, like, why? Get a life. It is very possible because they have safe rooms underneath the ground over there in Florida. And if you look at the diagrams of the safe rooms, it could easily be possible. Thank you, Rona Jane. I mean, you're just so reasonable with your opinion about that. My goodness. Dilly Owen says, "I'm telling you, these cases have got me to the point where I don't think anything else can shock me. Crazy." I know. And then those gaslighters that want to say, "Oh my God, what a crazy idea for people to think that you could hide under a flower bed." And that, of course, was what I thought when it was happening, when it was in real time. I was just like, "Oh no, these crazy ideas. Like, what are people thinking?" And I looked at the footage and I was like, "That's ridiculous. Like, yeah, there's something over there, but it couldn't possibly be a hand. Nobody's going to hide under a freaking flower box." But then you look at all the photographs, the aerial photographs of the garden, and you look at the way things were set, the furniture and the flower bed or garden box, whatever you want to call it. It was ridiculous. We just ignore the closed-minded people over here. Cool. That's a good way to do it. And allegedly says, I am rude and closed-minded about everything. I'm a rude person to everyone all the time. Too cute. Too funny. Um, yeah. So I'm glad you guys don't think I'm a complete wingnut. I have been really careful about my opinion of Brian Laundrie being alive because I know a lot of people would just like to say, yeah, he's dead. Remember, we found a tooth, and yeah, they said he was dead, so he must be dead. And if you look online, you guys, I think I've seen this, but I just try to ignore it. Like, they've actually like pieced together like an entire skeleton that they were trying to say is Brian Laundrie now. So it's not just like the jawbone that they started with, not just the tooth that they started with, but all of those bones like don't match. It's like a puzzle of different bones from different places from different people. It's pretty obvious. Like, Google it. It's crazy. You want to talk about insanity, conspiracy crap. I mean, the lengths that these people will go to, and the police that just made complete fools of themselves and just rolled with it. Like, yeah, it's all good, whatever. Larissa says, the thing is, people are so gullible and believe anything they see and hear, and they can't make their own judgment and opinions. And you know what really gets me is people that just want to believe the authorities. Because, yeah, wouldn't that be nice if we could trust the authorities? But haven't we all learned by now that there's a lot of lies in a lot of cases? And sometimes the authorities will admit that years down the road, right? Which is amazing that they'll admit it ever. But yeah, it's unfortunate that we can't trust the authorities. And it just drives me nuts when people say, well, we just got to go with what the police say. It's like, no, you can choose to go with what the police say, but there's no got to. I mean, unfortunately, you can't always trust the police. I wish that that were not true. We should be able to always trust the police. It's wrong that we can't, right? It's absolutely wrong that we can't, in my opinion. So yeah, the police were really nervous about what dog the bounty hunter was gonna uncover when he came to Florida, or I mean, sorry, Moab. So they just got themselves together and got themselves a suspect within 24 hours. So, um, when there's a hate crime, I got my notes here so I wouldn't forget to talk about some of these important things. When there's a hate crime, it needs to go into the FBI National Data Bank. They need to track hate crimes. They also have a lot of resources for hate crimes, but it's really important to track hate crimes, whether it's racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, whatever it is. It's really important to track it, to know where the haters are, the ones that will commit homicide. And then you've got a state like Utah. No offense to Utah, it's a beautiful state. They've got some of the most amazing natural wonders in the world. Um, but it's also an extremely conservative state with the history of the Mormon church and the extreme homophobia. Extreme homophobia. Like, there's no gay people in Utah. Like, that's just how it is, right? Sure. In my opinion, that separates the good law enforcement and the dishonest law enforcement. There is only bars between the two. I know people that work in law enforcement, and one of the things that I think good cops like to say is that you're only as good as your last case. I like that. I think that's cool. I just don't get bothered by the internet and people. I've been called every name in the book and have been beat up by a dude. Internet trolls can't get to me. And That's such a good comment. I'm gonna go ahead and highlight that one too, because as a creator, as a content creator, you know that people are gonna come at you. And so you have to thicken your skin and not take it personal. But I just don't have time for it. I don't have time for it. Like this is we're already at 3:40 in the afternoon. Let me go ahead and do my timestamp. It's December 20th. It's Tuesday. And yeah, I only have about 20 more minutes to work on this live with you guys. And I don't want to be sidetracked by that crap. And I don't ever want to be sidetracked by that crap. Some content creators are really good at taking a troll and using that as a jumping off point to make their point even more poignant. However, I'm not one of those content creators. I'm the kind of content creator that just likes to stay focused and positive, and I have no problem deleting people. And I gave that person a second chance. I don't usually. Honestly, I usually just block people for life. And I've told people that in my lives. I've given people a warning. So anybody who doesn't know that should know that. And even if you don't know that, you shouldn't be a jerk anyway. That's my opinion. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Dang. I do get worked up about it because I kind of think it's hilarious that people go around being haters, but I also think it's really awful and pathetic. It's detrimental to their own psyche and to anybody that interacts with them. So anyway, we have all these lovely people. See what I mean? Like, what a distraction. Got all these lovely people. Scottish Emma, I always love to hear what you have to say. Let me try to snag your comment real quick there. Replace. I keep saying this. My family thought I was crazy, far too much of a narcissist to kill himself, and all the time. His family had with him after Gabby passed. No way did his mom let him leave them to do that. Absolutely, Scottish Emma. Absolutely. And yeah, there was never a tear shed. There was just so much suspicious activity. And nobody saw a sign of him for 30 days before they realized, and just the whole time frame of the parents changing the last day that they saw him, and their little story about how he was all distraught. But wait, their story was that he was all distraught and ran off to the park where he allegedly offed himself. He was all distraught before Gabby was found. So, you know, the whole story is just freaking cockamamie. I'm so glad her family has been able to be there for each other, that they have the emotional resources, the financial resources to sue these MFs and, you know, continue to love their daughter even when she's no longer with them. I mean, duh, it's just freaking awful. I will go ahead and say, though, I feel like Brian L. might not be dead. LOL. He could be dead by now. I mean, he's such a jackass. Probably somebody's killed him. I'm kidding. No, I mean, narcissists don't kill themselves typically. I use O.J. Simpson as a prime example. Um, Scott Peterson would be another prime example. These narcissists will never kill themselves. They might say that they will to try to get empathy and, to try to manipulate, basically. His mom worked for the DA, and they're very protected people. Rana Jane. Right. And that was like up in Long Island where they were from. And I think she had that job for like 25 years, if I'm remembering accurately. I guess I am naive or stupid. When did wicked, evil, worse be accepted in the world? Oh, I know. And Caleb Lee says, Larissa, your videos are shocking, yet raise real life awareness. Thank you. If he was truly distraught at any point, and if it was mercy unaliving, he'd have just come forward and pled his case. None of them cared and helped him run. Right. Oh man, that cockamamie story and his letter, his journal, and his half note. Like, what are you talking about? Half note? Like they literally said he left a half note. Is that like a musical half note? Anyway, his story that he wrote down, remember the burn after you read letter? Was that he had not told his parents anything and begging the public to be nice to his parents and to not be mean because they didn't know anything. He was the bad guy. It was all on him. It was just ridiculous. Um, yeah. So he would be the last person to take his life. He was so full of himself and literally had nothing to show from his short life. And then they pretended that he had like $20,000. Remember that? And it was like, right, if he had $20,000, then why did he steal 1,000 out of Gabby's account on his way back to Florida? What a scumbag. So, one of the things that I think is concrete evidence in my hypothesis that he may be the person who killed Kaylin and Crystal is, if you guys will remember back to that time frame, he took a plane from Salt Lake City August 17th, I believe was the date, and came back August 23rd, I believe. I might be off by a day or two. But when this whole case was unfolding and I first heard that, I was like, that can't be right. Like that's got to be misinformation. And I heard it a few times and I verified it. And then it became public knowledge all over the true crime community that yes, he did spontaneously hop on an airplane from Salt Lake City on August 17th for the 6 days and come back. Remember, because he had to like clean out a storage unit with his dad to save money. Right. That makes so much sense. And during those 6 days, Gabby stayed at I think it was called an Express Inn, something like that. Um, I can't remember. I know I said a Holiday Inn one time and somebody corrected me. So it wasn't the Holiday Inn, but it was like an Express Inn. It was right near the airport. And she stayed in a room allegedly by herself for 6 days. And she didn't talk to her mother when she was there. She did speak with her father. He had ordered her a Domino's pizza at some point. She was working on her website again for those 6 days while she was there by herself. So Brian spontaneously decided that he had to fly back to Florida for a week on August 17th. And Steve Bertolini, the lawyer, said that that the two of them bought the plane ticket together with the money that they shared. Okay, you mean he used Gabby's money to buy the plane ticket. All right, gotcha. So, and yeah, he was helping her with that channel, but she was the driving force, and he was angry with her for wanting to stay focused on building her business, their business, right? So where was I with that? When she stayed at the hotel for 6 days and he came back on the 23rd, and then am I getting my date right? Did he murder her on the 25th, the 26th, the 27th, somewhere around there? So they drove from Salt Lake City up to the Grand Tetons. They had their incident at the Mary Piglets. And then just recently, we saw the videotape footage of the two of them shopping for groceries at Whole Foods right near the Mary Piglets. So, yeah, if anybody remembers the date of her death, I want to say it was August 26th, but that might be a day off, one direction or the other. It's been a long time since I dealt with the dates of these two cases. Their last resort is to make us feel bad by saying they'll unalive themselves. Absolutely. Polka dots, but if those shelters are common, why do you believe that would be the first place they checked? Also, did you remember the police call to the dirty laundry house for shots fired but wasn't legit? Um, okay. um, yeah, I'm not, uh, let's see. That's how the narcissist wants it, to keep you separate from everyone. Glad you survived it. Yeah. Scottish Emma says, I look at my own precious baby boy and question what lengths I would go to protect him. Then I look at my girls and think, what if the roles were reversed? That's what separates us from people like the dirty laundries. Yeah. I remember all of my teachers wanting us to do better, and our parents taught us better. Um, Crime and Crochet, my hyper focus, says, yes, there was a 911 call made saying shots had been heard, but we were told it was just a hoax call. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, the whole thing was just a shit show, really, when it comes right down to it. Bottom line, dumpster fire shit show, right? Hopefully the Petitos will get something out of their lawsuit with the laundries. I think they will. But I did want to get refocused on Kylan and Crystal, because that was why I wanted to address this case at all. So a couple of things that are of importance to point out is that the crimes happened on national park land, just like the cases up in Tahoe more recently, right? So the National Park Bureau of Investigations is like their own FBI for these federal parks. It is typical that the county sheriffs will work these cases with the assistance of the National Park blah, blah, blah. Can I speak? National Park Bureau of Investigation. There we go. That's a tough word, bureau. Anyway, so the Grand County Sheriff's Office pretty much handled the case by themselves. They did not really tap into the National Park Bureau of Investigations, which, you know, I just think it's a lot easier to whitewash and cover up whatever it is that you want to whitewash and cover up if it happens in an odd jurisdiction. So the national park is an odd jurisdiction because you're going to have your local sheriff who's going to say, well, it's not really my jurisdiction. And then you're going to have the National Park Bureau of Investigations who's going to say, hey, can we get some assistance here from the sheriff? And they can do the pass the buck thing. I've seen it a lot. So it's just something to be aware of. It's like what we saw with the Kylie Rodney case, with the Trinity Backus case, and all of the other disappeared people in the Tahoe National Forest. Like, that should be investigated by the National Park Bureau of Investigation, not so much Nevada County Sheriff, Placer County Sheriff. It's like it's the FBI specific department that is just for the national federal parks, right? So let me read a few more of your comments here. And when I saw the two girls case, I was shocked that someone would do that in a national park. There are so many hikers and campers scattered all around. That's just ballsy to do it like that. It's a really good point, allegedly. Always with the really good points. Yeah. I would hate to think that law enforcement and news are in on keeping cases going for the news to continue to report for ratings, in my opinion. Yeah, it's pretty disgraceful. I mean, the news is supposed to be sort of a check balance type of operation with keeping our government honest. What was that movie that Meryl Streep just did a couple of years ago? I think it was called The Post. It was about the Washington, D.C. newspaper, and focused on the Panama Papers, I think it was, in 1972. And it really examined that issue. If you guys haven't seen that movie, it was pretty darn good. It was, I want to say, Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep, and it was about the history of the Post, the newspaper in the Washington D.C., and how they became a very reputable news source, basically, right? Or New York Post. Now I need to get out my Google. I want to say it was the New York Post, but the case was the DC, the Panama Papers. So it was all about the Pentagon. And yeah, it was like the New York Post was the newspaper that was competing with another newspaper. And they were kind of more like the National Enquirer type of newspaper at the time. And then that's how they got legit, basically, was holding the government accountable, to put it simply. Washington Post. Thank you, Heavenly Clouds. I hate it when I can't think of this stuff when I'm in the middle of a live. It's a good movie, isn't it? It's a really good movie. I mean, Meryl Streep, she's incredible. And I didn't know any of that. I mean, it was 1972. I was 5 years old. I actually lived in DC, but I was 5 years old. So I do remember the election when I was 5, and Nixon and Montgomery, and oh, those were the days, huh? You're being happy, warm my heart, Caleb. I'm having a peaceful day here, about to make soup. Hey, Kez, thanks. What's happening? Good to see you. I'm so glad I saw your comment. I'm going to highlight that. So, yeah, I was a little bit worried about doing this topic for the reasons that I mentioned at the beginning, and just because it is kind of, you know, a little bit out of left field almost, with all of the stuff that we're following right now. And just to kind of wrap up, I want to read a couple. Oh, I know, another Amber Alert in Ohio. Yes, Caleb Lee, I saw that. I live in Ohio, and yeah, like an hour ago, there was an Amber Alert from Columbus. Oh, Captain Kurt reacts. This is all so crazy. Hey, so yeah, it's so fun having the lives. It's just a kick, isn't it? It is really like we're having our little cocktail party or something, minus the cocktails, minus the human contact. But it's pretty awesome. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I will stay on for a few more minutes. It's getting close to 4 o'clock, so I do need to wrap it up, but I want to read a few more of your comments. The stickers that were on Kylie's laptop gave me a clue what I think happened to Crystal, Kylan, and Gabby, and possibly the Idaho 4. Rona Jane, I am so curious what you are referring to. I mean, honestly, that's kind of a bizarre connection, but I trust your judgment. I'm really curious if you can explain. So I just highlighted her comment. The stickers that were on Kylie's laptop gave me a clue what I think happened to Crystal and Kylan and Gabby, and possibly the Idaho 4. So yeah, it's interesting that Crystal, Kylan, Gabby, and Kylie were all murdered in national park land. And there, I said it. Kylie was murdered. Yes, she was. We all know that. This is ridiculous. This whole, like, she drove herself into the water crap. So let's see if you're able to follow up on that, Rona Jane. I could use a cocktail, Heavenly Cloud says. Oh my goodness. It has to do with cops. Okay, I follow, I think. And Brian Haig says, yep, kind of wonderful if any of the Idaho had been to Truckee. Kind of wondered if any of the Idaho had been to Truckee. Interesting. Caleb Lee says, Zena, Kevin Neese, Truth Breaker video on Kylie Rodney in 2 minutes. Okay, we better wrap it up, people, and we'll meet over there at Kevin Neese Truth Breaker video on Kylie. Wow. I'll read a couple more of your comments and then sign off here. Dilly, it's good you have your appetite back, means you're on the mend. Send healing jujus for prompt recovery. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, having a voracious appetite is a sign of good health. That's why it's important to fill up with all the right stuff. And the whole thing is ridiculous. I agree 100%. Like, people need to quit killing people, right? And when there are homicides, people need to not cover them up, and law enforcement needs to get on the ball and deal with it. Like, what in the world is going on with our Idaho 4? Like, why would it be taking so long? Ugh. Anyway, let me read a couple more and then sign off here, and we'll hop over to Kevin Neese's. Allegedly says to Larissa, guess what just got delivered? What just got delivered? Are you going to tell us? Oh, Penny Loafer. Hello. What got delivered allegedly? We can go, but not the going on the 2 autopsies. I was eating a boiled potato with sour cream. Now I am full. That sounds like a good meal. New microphone. Allegedly got a new microphone. Congratulations. That's awesome. I don't know, opinion, why I asked Idaho for part of the cover up. Yeah, it's not looking good in the Idaho 4 case. It's just not looking good with the process and procedure that law enforcement is having. I'll end on this, that just today I heard the police chief saying that now they're expanding their view, not just going back 24 hours before the incident, 24 hours after the incident. Now they're going 48 hours on either side. That just concerns me a great deal. That really concerns me. Kaz says, Rana, would you mind sharing your sticker theory with us? Could you email Zena or me, or make your own video? There you go. Sounds good. So I am going to wrap up, because I do want to give us all the opportunity to go over to Kevin Neese and see what he's doing with the Kylie Rodney case. Thank you so much for joining me, you guys. And put in the comments, if you would like to continue, like maybe a follow-up to this Kylan and Crystal case, because I feel like I'm just kind of scraping the surface, just kind of giving a broad stroke picture of what may be possible. Anyway, peace out. You guys have a great afternoon. Make sure you drink your water, eat your protein, eat your fruits and veggies, get your exercise, get your rest, take it easy, hurry up and chill out, right? Just be kind to yourself, be kind to other people, and don't allow anybody to treat you without respect or kindness, right? Cheers. I'll see you over at Mr. Kevin Neese's, the true crime cowboy rock star.